First of all, wonderful to see you. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm here to talk about something very dear to my heart. It's called Toward a Fiduciary Society. Um, and I went on a world tour 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I went on a world tour, and the purpose of that tour was to look and see wherever I went, what and to ask people and to set up workshops where people would be thinking about this. Um, what uh, what would a golden civilization look like? A civilization that felt complete, that felt sustainable, that felt uh, really positive, and that could go in a resilient way for countless generations into the future. And the reason that I did it was that in life planning, the methodology that I fostered and started years ago, one of the things that we've realized is that when we build a really strong vision for a client of who they really want to be, and almost always it's something that they've never imagined was possible, was fully possible. But when we create that vision, it is so powerful that they can't say no to it. And my thought was coming out of the banking crisis and other things happening in the world was that the world felt a little off, and yet we are coming together. It's like one earth. And so that it was time for a great vision, as in life planning, to come alive. And if we could make it into something that went, viral, so to speak, that humanity could not say no to it. So that's basically the outline of, and I'm going to be talking about the golden civilization later in the conversation as we come to civilization, the essence of civilization. But I'm going to start in a few other places. So first of all, what is fiduciary? A lot of people don't know what fiduciary means, and uh, and fiduciary means it's really someone who's trustworthy. So we have fiduciaries in society, and they are trustworthy towards someone else. So they put someone else's interests ahead of their own. It's really quite an amazing and wonderful thing. They're selfless in some ways. They're compassionate, and uh, and a fiduciary society, I think, and I think you'll see this, would be far more productive and profitable, far more energized and entrepreneurial, far happier and kinder, and with less regulations than the economy that we have right now, than the society that we have right now, the civilization that we have right now. And you might go, well, how could that be? Why would that happen? Why would it be so efficient and so humane? And the answer is because it listens. So I want to go to this connection between listening and freedom and fiduciary. I've written 12 books in my lifetime, and all of them are about freedom. And I think all of them are also about listening, kind of looking at different links between the two. Fiduciary is something that I've talked about very, very boldly and quite a bit in my most recent books on civilization. The connection here is that listening delivers freedom, and a fiduciary is a great listener. So the first thing that I'd like to start with is a question that I think is really worth listening to. And I'd like you to listen deeply to this with all of your being. And the question is, how would it feel to you if every organization you encountered was trustworthy and humane in all they did? How would your life change? And I know for many people will come up with obstacles right away, or immediately our cynicism comes up. How's that going to happen? Um, I'd like you just to feel this, to really take it in. How would it feel to you if every organization you encountered was trustworthy and humane in all they did? How would your life change? regardless of how, your experience of listening to that question in the moment, there's something extraordinary, evidence-based, that has come out in the last 12 months about listening that is profound and has impacted my thinking tremendously. And that is that listening is 100 million times as fast as thought. I mean, that's just an astonishing notion. And meaning that there's a huge amount of information. Imagine 100 million moments between thoughts, for instance. Huge amount of information in listening that we're not capturing because largely we are thought-based. The question to ask here is how do we maximize uh, the the usefulness of this information about listening? How do we maximize it? And mindfulness really is a huge part of the answer because mindfulness is the practice toward the mastery of the present moment, also toward the mastery of listening and of emotional intelligence. So, uh, what the what I'd like to do is draw attention to this difference between listening and thinking for a moment. And first off, there's just this realization that we have crafted civilization, ourselves in many ways, um, our economy, our government, all of it. We've crafted civilization by thought, and yet listening is far faster, is far more profound, and delivers freedom. Just a brief example of this. This is something that's been in all of my recent books that I've written, five or six of my most recent books. And it's called The Map of Mindfulness. And really, it's looking at this notion that we primarily live in the present moment. In fact, we exclusively live in the present moment. And certainly if we're awake, and that the experience of freedom, which we're exploring here, only occurs in the present moment. So we've never really experienced freedom in the past because we're always in the present moment. And when I began to think about this and realize this, I realized that our map of time and space is off. It's not describing the world as we experience it or as it really is, because it is, where's the present moment in that upper oval of time and space, the way we see it on a PBS show, for instance. Um, so that realm up there is the realm of thinking. And when we use mindfulness to approach the present moment, what happens is we return again and again to the present moment whenever we get lost in thought or lost in feelings, lost in any way at all. We are listening to the present moment. And the consequence of that, I'm not going to go through the whole chart here, the whole map here, but the consequence is because we are listening to present moments that are 100 million times as fast as thought, our energy level is rising. So we are through mindfulness practice, we are both energized and also we know this, we find ourselves much calmer, much more at peace. We're more energized and we're more focused because we keep coming back and we keep letting go of the thoughts that plague our minds. And most of those thoughts are about ourselves, about our circumstances. So what we're actually doing is we're cultivating selflessness. And in doing that, these virtues at the base of this map that I've described rise up through us, and we're able to bring selfless qualities into the world. So we bring greater alertness because of that quickness of moments occurring, and because of the lessening of self, we find great quiet, all the virtues, and occasionally, profound spiritual experiences. Which brings me to this question again of the connection between listening, freedom, and fiduciary. So we were just looking at each moment, and the uh, the connection that I want to draw attention to right now is this connection between freedom and listening. So contemplatives for thousands of years have showed us the way by doing some kind of contemplative or mindfulness practice to the experience of each moment, and they describe their experiences as having qualities of awakening, of enlightenment, of freedom, of rebirth, just extraordinary experiences. So we know that that delivers freedom. What I've seen in my career as a trainer in life planning is that when we listen to others, when we listen to our clients in a life planning experience, what happens is that that trust deepens. The quiet that we have inside of ourselves allows the client to go deep inside themselves. And they're able, because of that, profound listening, to come up with ideas about the meaning in their life and where they'd really like to go in their life that leads them also to a dream of freedom and then to freedom. And so the central question that we're going to come back to roughly halfway through this talk is what's happening with civilization? I mean, intuitively, I think we feel that civilization should be this web of listening to each other, delivering freedom around the world. Why isn't that happening? So we'll be looking directly at that. But first, let's go a bit more into this experience of life planning, how life planning delivers freedom. And here, this we're delivering it to others by listening to them. Imagine just being listened to and how extraordinary that is when you're really listened to, exploring who it is that you really want to be. And in life planning, one of the amazing things is that 90% of the first meeting can be just listening and just simply asking anything else and just being there in an empathic way. And what happens is that that listening allows the development of a vision, and that that vision is so powerful that it leads almost instantaneously to entrepreneurial action. And I've come to think of this as the structure of evolution. Certainly, it's the evolution, it's the a transformational evolution we see in our clients. But my hunch is it goes deeper than that. And this has a lot to do with evolution. And that is just simply great listening leads towards some momentary notion of what freedom is. And then it leads toward action, toward freedom. So life planning has a structure to it that shows this quality of listening. That it has these five elements. We call it evoke. It's an acronym: E for exploration, V for vision, O for obstacles, K for knowledge, and E for execution. In exploration, our listening, first of all, establishes trust. And it's similar in a meditative experience, a mindfulness experience. We have to listen again and again and again to get to that place where we get quiet. And that's a place of trust inside of ourselves. And then what happens here in life planning is that the vision begins to arise. We've got some particular exercises that I'm going to share with you. But the vision, again, it deepens and it develops into a vision that is profound and that is life-changing and is so powerful that a client can't say no to it. So we do this thing of two hands. So this is the life you're living right now, and here's your dream of freedom as you put it together here. Which one would you choose? I've never seen anyone choose this hand. They always go for the dream of freedom. And what is amazing about that is what happens to the obstacles. Here we're in a civilization where we're perplexed and disturbed by the obstacles that we see around us. When the vision is powerful and clear, those obstacles are resolved very quickly. It's just stunning how quickly that happens. And then knowledge and execution happen again, just as quickly. So briefly, I'd like to go to the core set of questions we ask. We do a number of exercises. Don't think this is just the only one, but this is the one that is kind of most famous. And it's worth considering, even if you've done this exercise before. And I'll give you, 10 or 15 or 30 seconds to consider each question. But there are three questions. And the first one is to imagine that you have all the money that you need for the rest of your life. You may not be as rich as Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, but you've got everything you need. And the question is, if you woke up to that realization, how would your life change? What would you do differently? And just really let go and feel what would occur. What would be the transformations that would occur? What would be the things that you do? And take a moment or two to just jot down whatever you think. And then I'm going to move to the second question. Feel free to look at these questions later. They're in pretty much in every book and practically every interview I've ever given, so you can find them easily, even online. Question two, this goes deeper. So this time you are going to the doctor and you feel perfectly well, but the doctor lets you know that you have a rare illness. And as healthy as you feel right now, sometime between year 5 and year 10, you're just going to keel over. That's it. You don't know when that moment will come. You'll feel as healthy as you feel right now until that moment. And the question then is, if you knew that your longevity was limited in this way, your mortality was coming up in 5 to 10 years, what would you do differently? What would you do in the time remaining? How would you change your life? What will shift? So again, take a minute or less to just reflect on that and write anything down you'd like. And then we're going to go to the third question. And this we're going to ask in some new ways here. But here the scenario starts off the same. You go to the doctor. They've been doing some tests. You feel perfectly fine. And this time you're really shocked because the doctor reveals that um, they've misdiagnosed and you've had a terrible illness, and that illness has come to term. So the question is not what you would do with that time, but the question is reflecting on the life that you'd anticipated living, that you thought you would be doing, the things you thought you would be doing. What did you miss? Who did you not get to be? What did you not get to do? And again, reflect on that for a moment. And what people don't what's really stunning about life planning is that it's this question that is a life and death question that forms the basis of most life plans, probably 90% of life plans. And perhaps 90% of the material within a life plan comes through the answers to this question, because this is a life and death question for someone. So it's very profound. And I'd like to turn it as you're reflecting on your own life in relation to this question. I'd like to reflect on it since the main theme of today is toward a fiduciary society. So it's about civilization. And I'd like to ask this question in a way that reflects on civilization. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you're privy to some extraordinary intelligence out there. Maybe it is artificial intelligence, I don't know. But you have the ability to know what is going to happen. And you learn that tomorrow, 24 hours from today, what you learn is that humanity ends. You don't know how. It might be AI, it might be nuclear holocaust, it might be the planet burning up. You have no idea how, but you know that in 24 hours humanity's gone. So the question is, I mean, it's a question that we're wrestling with. We don't think it'll happen that soon, but we're all wrestling with this now. A lot of civilization is. The question is, what did we miss? What did humanity miss? What did we think humanity was destined for? Who did humanity not get to be? What did they not get to do? And a further question, what could we have done to secure that future for humanity that that feels right for who we really aspire to be? What could we have done? And well, what I would like to do is draw us back to this notion of a world where the institutions are humane and trustworthy. And to suggest if we had done that, that this world that we're imagining probably wouldn't be happening, this devastating world. So I want to go back for a moment to the Golden Civilization tour that I did. And this is when we're moving into civilization, the civilization part of the conversation here. So so I mentioned that the notions that when I went on the tour that people had the same vision of what civilization should be, what a golden civilization would be. And it was true whether I went to an autocratic country, a dictatorship, an intensely poor country, poverty-stricken country, a rich country, a liberal Western country, wherever I went, all over the states, wherever I went. And other people were also leading these conversations. And what they primarily said was they didn't want any more corruption. They wanted an end to corruption. They wanted institutions, and this sometimes the focus was more on government, and sometimes it was more on corporations. Sometimes it was even on nonprofits. They wanted institutions that they knew they could trust. They wanted institutions that told the truth. They wanted adequate uh, uh, income, adequate health care, adequate food and shelter for everyone. They wanted far less inequality. They wanted to know that the earth was sustainable and wasn't going to burn up. They wanted an end to bigotry, an end to discrimination. They wanted kindness. They wanted vitality. And everywhere I went, whatever the governmental structure, everywhere I went, they wanted democracy. So I left, I ended that tour and COVID hit. And my thought was, um, if everybody wants this, why aren't we delivering it? Why aren't we delivering it? And why instead do we find these things here? Why do we find what economists call negative externalities? These are, and I'll describe them in a moment, but all of these things, you can understand them. All of these things that we call negative externalities are scaling globally faster than we can cope. And it's why we are so disturbed in civilization right at this moment. So to understand this a bit, and then to come back to this question of why aren't we delivering this and how could we deliver it, first consider climate change. That's the easiest one to understand negative externality. A negative externality is essentially an aspect to an organization that was unintended in its purpose. So the best example is climate change and fossil fuel, in particular oil companies. Oil companies, when they started delivering fuel to us, they did not intend to burn up the earth. That was not part of their game plan, right? Their game plan was to provide us with fuel, with transportation, all of those things that were good things. There may have been some things that weren't so good that they noticed right away. I'm sure there were. But they didn't intend for the earth to burn up. So that's a negative externality. Looking at autocracy and inequality, there's another thing that is really worth thinking about here. And that is that autocracy and inequality, what we're seeing today in civilization, is a negative externality of capitalism itself. If you think about the structure of capitalism, capitalism is a hierarchy. And that hierarchy naturally leads to more and more power at the top and more income at the top. So what happens as capitalism develops and develops more and more strength, we see the problems, the negative externalities of autocracy and inequality occurring. We we in the Western democracies have thought of ourselves as democracies. But when we look at what's happening with inequality, you can question that. So just as an example, it's a powerful example. In America right now, our three richest billionaires own as much as 180 million people in America. So own as much as the bottom half of the population. And it's even worse if you go internationally, because internationally, 26 billionaires own as much as 3.8 billion people. So the question is thinking about how we think of democracy. Again, this term fiduciary, we think of democracy as being a fiduciary to the people in a way. And of course, capitalism has this rule that we must be fiduciary to the shareholder. So here we have three people, and here we have 180 million. I can't put enough fingers in this room to get up to 180 million. You're just going to have to imagine it. So my question to you is, with this kind of disparity of inequality, which fiduciary structure is working? The fiduciary structure of democracy to the people, or the fiduciary structure of shareholder to the shareholder? And I think it's pretty clear that the system we have is primarily working from the shareholder fiduciary element. One more thing to consider here is the question of misinformation. I mean, this is again an astonishing thing that we have so much right now that is undermining uh, civilization. It's undermining our ability to know how to vote, even with misinformation, lies, and propaganda. So again, at the end of this tour, I was reflecting on all of this, and I was thinking, a lot of people say, when we know them, we've met them, hey, if you think you've got a better system, show me one, right? What could be better than the system we have right now and all the things that it has done so well? But you have to think, this is a time that's different from all other times in human history, because this time, for the first time, we're all together. All of humanity can speak with each other. It's an astonishing time that we have come to. And it's a time where these negative externalities scale the way businesses are trying to scale. Businesses want to scale globally. But unfortunately, their negative externalities come along at the same time. So the question that I asked myself was, if this were the very best system that we could come up with, wouldn't, after 250 years, we all know how the system works. I mean, the work is how it's supposed to work. There's competition, there's entrepreneurial endeavor, and that entrepreneurial endeavor is very creative and it creates all these new things. And here we are. I mean, we're coming across many countries, many continents, oceans, to speak with each other. I mean, it's just astonishing what we're able to do. But if it were the best system, surely, after 250 years, wouldn't we find the very best of humanity at the top of every hierarchy of power? Wouldn't that be what would be developing? It wouldn't just be things, would it? So if it were the best system, and what it made me realize is that these problems that we're seeing, are are clearly systemic. And too often we find ourselves locked in some kind of political battle or concern about one of these or one of the other problems that we have. And we go off and we fight or complain or whatever we do, get politically engaged or just lethargic around our particular pet peeve, what disturbs us most. When in fact, if these are systemic, we can solve them with a very simple tweak to to the fiduciary structure of civilization. So that's what I want to propose to you, and that tweak is one of fiduciary listening, where listening becomes the dominant factor in civilization and in capitalism. So if we move to the next slide, we'll look at what I call the four corners of fiduciary. And this is very interesting. We've started talking about this. So we all know the corner of profit, that's fiduciary to shareholders. I've talked about this notion of fiduciary to client. A lot of people don't trust the financial world, and there's a lot of good reason for that. And I feel very lucky, and a lot of my friends have been part of a world that is fiduciary to their clients. And it's felt like a wonderful world to be part of. Great colleagues, great friends, noble purpose. Um, uh, B Corps about 15 years ago came along and thought, hey, fair enough. But again, if this is the best system, how come we're burning up the planet? And why are we mistreating people? Why is there so much inequality in the world? And they created something that is has profoundly uh, influencing, I think, corporate thinking right now, and you'll see why in a moment. But the so they had this notion of let's do people and planet and profit as three elements in fiduciary. Let's put them all together. And right now, it started with nothing 15 years ago or so. There's 10,000 B corporations in the world. 2,500 of them roughly are in America or North America. Roughly the same number are in England, which is part of why I've moved to England to launch a startup here, because there's so much energy around this. But there's been huge energy throughout civilization around this issue. Just think about ESG, which the current administration is undermining. But pretty much all the major corporations in the world have had ESG committees wrestling with this question, the environment and society and governance. So it's a movement that is occurring. And uh, and and as I'm thinking about what is the fiduciary structure that would solve it all, that would end the dystopian negative externalities that we've been seeing in society. What I realized was that there were two things that have developed since B corporations came along that we see, and one of them is a failure of civilization and of our organizations to hold to the truth, to tell us the truth. And the second thing is that people, planet, and profit doesn't include democracy. And again, we're seeing an undermining of democracy, one of the great values that we fought for many years. And I think the third thing that we're doing with fiat is we're saying it can't be voluntary. People backslide under pressure, and it's time that we made fiduciary in all things the law of the land. So the question on looking at this structure, fiat doesn't eliminate fiduciary to shareholders, but it says that human values come first. And the question is, how do we get from profit through the four corners so that we end up with a fiduciary in all things model? And I would say that there are two ways that we do that. One of them is through legislation, a very simple piece of legislation, and the other is through turbocharging institutional listening so that institutions are listening in an extraordinary way to the civilization around them. So let's look at those two things as we move toward our conclusion here. Um, Here is the piece of legislation that I think would end the problems that we're seeing, the negative externalities. And this is something I'm promoting across cultures. It's called a fiduciary in all things, fiat. A fiduciary standard of obligation is required for all institutions, corporate, nonprofit, and governmental, to place the interests of all stakeholders, of truth, of humanity, democracy, and the living planet that sustains us first above their own self-interest. And then just going one step further in terms of how we think about organizational structure, I've been wrestling with this notion of what we think of what a corporation is, what an organization is. In fact, one of my daughters asked me not long ago, what is a company? And I said, well, it's kind of like a hierarchy. And she said, what is a hierarchy? And I said, a hierarchy is like an outline. And she said to me, well, Daddy, we learned about outlines when we were 6 years old. Is that what it's like? And I said, yeah, it's that simple. And then I began to think about all the different ways we think about the structure of companies. And we think about them as machines, we think about them as hierarchies, we think about them as information systems, as computer systems. And I thought, none of those things are really sustainable the way when we look out our window or we take a walk and we look at what is sustainable around us, the way a tree is. None of those things are listening to the world the way a tree does. And I thought, well, let's look at a tree for a moment and just consider the leaves. Consider the leaves in a large oak tree, a mature oak tree. There are about 500,000 of them. It's an extraordinary number. And all of them are listening. They're listening to the wind and they're kind of blowing in the wind and they're giving information about the strength and the resiliency of the stems and the branches. And of course, we're watching it and we're kind of blown away in awe or wonder at the beauty of these trees doing this. And they're listening to insects as insects come along and chip away at the leaves. They're listening to the rain and they're bringing the moisture down into the tree, down into the roots to make the tree more sustainable. They're listening to the sun through photosynthesis. They are the lungs of the tree. They're listening to the chemical composition of the air and they are breathing in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen so that we can live, so that all of us can sit here together contemplating what is it to be sustainable. And they do it all without an ounce of regulation, without a hierarchy, without someone taking the top of the organization away and going off and living in some palatial mansion someplace. Um, they are completely sustainable. And we're at a place where we're coming together on the planet where we need to begin to think about what does a sustainable organization look like? And I would argue that the thing that is most sustainable in what we are discussing is listening and fiduciary, because it's listening to everything. So this question of how do we turbocharge listening into our organizations is is what I'm now attempting to do. This is what my business plan. I got I won it. I think I call it winning because it's a rare thing to receive an innovator founder visa in the UK to launch a startup, to bring all of these ideas into businesses. And basically it's the notion of fiduciary listening, creating business productivity and profitability. So how does it do it? Just really three really simple things. Going back through what we've talked about. Imagine making everybody smarter by giving them those 100 million moments between thoughts. You know, when we're just a thinking machine, we're missing an enormous amount of what is going on. Um, Mindfulness practice is a practice of emotional intelligence because in order to be present, we need to come to terms, to be at ease in the midst of our anxieties. but also this listening. Imagine 100 million moments. How much information is in those moments? How much knowledge, how much wisdom that we're missing when we're not listening. So let's make everybody smarter. That's number one. Number two, to break the unspoken barrier, to basically unleash and to harness the energy of your workforce's personal aspirations. Think about this for a moment. How, think about a business, and we all either work with for a business or we own a business or we have employees. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do where do the employees rate the business in terms of them liking it or loving it or whatever you call it? And what at what level do they rate it? And you might say somewhere 5, you might say less, you might say more, but then think of in terms of 1 to 10, how powerful for an employee is their own personal aspiration for freedom. Got to be a 10. Got to be a 10. And that's what we discover in life planning. So when you compare the energy of that aspiration for freedom with the energy of their relatedness to the corporation, now maybe that corporation falls back to a 2 or a 3 because the energy difference is so enormous. So there is a huge amount of energy available for productivity in a business by breaking this unspoken barrier and essentially by saying to the employees, I believe in who you are more than in what your role is in the company that I'm running. I want you to experience personal freedom and the greatest possible meaning in your life more. That means more to me than you're fulfilling your role in the company. Takes a brave C-level organization to do that, but those are the organizations I'm going into. B corporations, conscious capitalism organizations, ESG related all of these corporations are going in that direction because they put the people ahead of or equal to the profit. Huge amount of productive energy right there. What's the greatest force if we look at the history of civilization? What's the greatest force there that we see? And I think what we see there is this movement of progress that we think about it as a development of freedom. So we see the force for democracy, the force for the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press. We see the suffragette movement at the beginning of the 20th century. We see the civil rights movement, the gender equality, all of these movements and the sweep of history, the power of those movements. One of the things I'm hearing as I'm going around to businesses is Gen Z, they don't care about the business. All they care about is themselves. That's what I'm hearing. And but people in Gen Z, I know people in Gen Z. That's just not true. They care about they what they're feeling is that the business doesn't care. The business they're in doesn't really care. Doesn't care about them. It doesn't care about a positive outcome for the world. Whatever mission the business has, it's not making it so that it feels like it's something that the workforce can be passionate about. So what we're doing is we're energizing fiat by making it personal. We're saying the business, here's the business's mission, both mission for business and mission as a fiduciary in all things. But now every employee creates their own personal vision of what a fiduciary would be, of who they want to be. And so suddenly you have this dynamic of civilization delivering freedom and all of that productivity being delivered to an organization. So that's the business side of things. But there's another side that is in a way more personal and related to all of us. And that is that each of you can make a tremendous difference by going to this website, the Fiduciary in All Things website. Just on the website, there's just a few things that stand out. But the truth is that the only way fiat is going to make a difference in the world is that if it's a grassroots movement that has numbers to it. And the only way it's going to have numbers is if you're part of that movement. And you go to that website, there's a little question about why do you think fiduciary in all things would be a good thing? Compose something, put something down. We'd love to quote you if possible. There's no profit motive in this website at all. It's just trying to get this notion spread across society. So make the fiat pledge and then consider putting these logos. In fact, do put these logos on your website, on your social media pages. I mean, they're beautiful logos, the two with the earth. One of them is so simple and so lovely. And we've got, we'll show you how to do it. It's all there. There's only 2 pages to the website. It's not a lot. You don't have to read much. And then the final thing is host kitchen table conversations. And these conversations go back to the question we started with. And this is just, and you can do this with any organization you belong to, any community organization, spiritual organization, educational organization. Gather people together and ask them to consider this question and facilitate their responses. Ask them, how would it feel to you if every organization you encountered was trustworthy and humane in all they did? How would your life change? I gathered my family. I have a couple of children in college, and they brought their friends home for the holidays last December. And I gathered a bunch of neighbors together around our kitchen table. And I asked this question, and it was quite something hearing uh, young women, old, all, all of us basically saying how much safer we would feel in the world, how much more at ease we would feel, even people who are just staying at home and not engaged in productivity out into the world said, boy, that would be such a relief for me. Everybody talked about trust and truth. A lot of people talked about how they would engage in entrepreneurial activity that they'd been wanting to do for years, but felt that the world was too harsh, too cruel, untrustworthy to be able to do it. The most poignant thing came from one of the young women. And she said to me, George, if this were to occur, I think I might consider having children after all. I want to end dystopia. I don't want it to let it really get going. And that's why I'm talking to you. And I hope you will join and make some effort and help us out in the Fiduciary and All Things website and in any other way you can.